welcome to another episode of Modern Mom, where we talk about being a mom in the 21st century. My name is Remy Kay. I am a comedian and a certified life and relationship coach. I have Satara Kashani.
Yeah, you do.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Okay, Satara, I've been trying to get on here for a long time. So, Satara, you do yoga, but you've also have a background in engineering and you work in nature, actually, which is the coolest thing ever. And we're going to talk about all of that stuff. But, um, but yeah, hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you? It's been a minute
I
since
know.
I've seen
I
you.
know. It's been a while. We haven't caught up in a while. And I was like setting up and I wanted to catch up with you. Let's see what's been going on with me. So I've been doing this campaign board for a school board,
hmm
basically. And that's been keeping me really busy. I did not know what it entails to do a campaign. I didn't understand. And I'm really glad I didn't understand because I think for us lay people who aren't involved in politics and don't understand all the intricacies of politics, I'm really glad that I kind of went in almost blindly because then I get to just do it as it comes
Yeah,
and
that's
do my
cool.
best. Yeah. And I of course would love to be on school board and I really care about, my little students, but I also care about the rest of the students in the area. I love the teachers. I've done PTO for a long time. And I would love to be school board, but also I know that, I'll be like, we'll be okay. I'll be okay. There's obviously other elections too. I just signed up for this. I declared, it's called declaration whenever you sign up to be a candidate for anything, basically. And I only signed up in July.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's like a relatively short term that you're on there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So I just kind of
high
like,
hopes, low expectations.
exactly. Exactly. So that's kind of one of the things that's been going on with me. What about you? Been doing yoga for?
I've been practicing yoga for a little over 2 years now. And that was something that I found kind of by chance. Joined the climbing gym that we met at and kind of stumbled into a yoga class, not really knowing what to expect, kind of going with the idea of like, oh, I'm gonna stretch now. This is gonna be like a cool warm up for climbing. And then it
Which it
ended
is.
up,
Yoga can
which
be cool
it
for
can
before and
be.
after.
The class that I stumbled into was an Ashtanga class, which is on the more physically and like mentally challenging sides of yoga.
Mhm.
Um, and it was tough and I could barely hold the poses
Mhm.
and I was exhausted afterwards, but then lying in shavasana, I was like, "Oh, like
Finally.
this feels really different than anything else I've ever experienced." And I kind of got hooked there.
Mhm.
And then
So this was 2 years ago.
this was 2 years ago.
Mhm.
And from there, like that specific class kind of became like the highlight of my week.
Nice.
Um, I don't know if
Ashtanga, do we know what this means?
this is well, it's kind of a misnomer in the sense that like almost everything in what we consider like Western yoga is a misnomer. So Ashtanga literally means the 8 limbs.
Okay. So you started doing yoga like 2 years ago and you got your certification where?
At the Shivananda Ashram up in Grass Valley.
Okay. And tell me about that experience.
So I quit my engineering job in about a year ago, August of last year. Kind of unsure of what I wanted to do. The only plan that I had was to go up for a month and do this yoga certification. I went up to Grass Valley, lived on the ashram for a month, and there you're kind of following like a strict regiment of like you're up at 5:30 every morning, you're starting the day in satsang.
What is
Um,
that?
that's like when you do your kirtan chanting
Mhm.
and meditation and kind of just like a meetup in the morning where usually someone will speak. One of the swamis, one of the monks there will speak. You have like a little bit of time to meditate, to practice bhakti yoga, which is like the yoga of devotion when you're singing or chanting. And then
So that was in Grass Valley.
that
Where
was
is
up in
that?
Grass. That's like about 3 hours north of here.
Okay, so it's in the US. What does the ashram look like? Is it very traditional looking to your understanding?
It's on a farm, spread out little buildings out there, and
Nice.
you're in a beautiful setting up there. I would recommend it to anyone who is able to take a little bit of time off to do like an immersive yoga teacher training.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was a very unique experience, and I met some really amazing people up there, made some cool friends, and learned a lot.
That's similar to where we're at now. We're in this very beautiful setting right now. So we're up in the mountains. It's hard to kind of see what's behind us, but there's a view of kind of the valley behind us. And this is in Santa Cruz County.
Yes.
And so it seems like this is kind of your draw. You really like this type of environment. You're kind of working here, or working in the open space. And tell us about that.
After coming back from my yoga teacher training, I was looking to find some sort of work that connected with the reason that I got into engineering in the first place. I kind of went into engineering with the idea, oh, I'm gonna do environmental work and work where I'm making a positive impact. And then the reality of like getting into the field was being in the Bay Area, especially. I think I was working on a lot of construction projects that were things that I didn't want to see in the Bay Area, where it might be like, okay, we're tearing down this strip mall, but we're tearing down a bunch of small businesses, family-owned businesses, immigrant-run businesses, and we're putting up overpriced condos, or we're putting up a data center or a warehouse. Some of the projects would be low-income housing, which you would be initially be like excited for until you find out that, oh, it's low-income housing, but it's based on the median income of the county, which is like $100,000,
Yeah.
or it's low-income housing where only 10% of the units are actual
Hmm.
low-income housing.
Yeah.
So stuff like that was super disheartening, and that was my reason for leaving because I was like, "Oh, I feel like I'm a part of the problem that I see in the Bay Area."
Yeah. Well, now $100,000 is considered impoverished in this
Right.
area now.
Yeah,
It's
which is
crazy.
absolutely absurd, especially considering wages out here can totally vary.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could be making like 70K out here, 80K out here, and still be,
Totally in
struggling,
poverty.
living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
Mm,
Even you could be making six figures and be living paycheck to paycheck essentially.
yeah.
Yeah, so I, kind of have a similar story where I did work in engineering for a long time and I did
Mhm.
love it. I loved the technology and I loved kind of working with other people. So that was my favorite part about it, doing, product management, program management, really having to translate and communicate a lot of times from group to group because a lot of groups have different lingos and a lot of groups have different things that they talk about. And
Right.
so that was my favorite part about it. And then what I realized is that things did and have been changing over time. So I don't know if you remember, this is even when I was young, like the dot-com boom back in the 90s. And things were really a certain way. And it was really flashy to be in high tech. Companies did really fun things and kept families together a lot of times and did fun picnics and, things like that. So growing up, I remember that side of high tech.
Yeah.
And then as I entered high tech and started to have my own family, that wasn't the case as much. And I found that I felt like I wasn't. My kids were little, like babies. It didn't really make a difference to them who was taking care of them. I mean, I'm sure it did to some degree, but anybody can kind of change a diaper.
Mhm.
But as they're older now, they're at this age where quality time is just so important.
Mhm.
And I had gotten this job actually around here, which isn't, it's great. It's a beautiful area, but it's obviously very far from where I live or further, especially to drive every day or at least 3 or 4 days a week. And I found that, my kids just weren't getting the time that they needed. And so things worked out in a way that I was able to kind of, start my own business and start things up and, do things. And you're in a similar place where you could go either way. You're kind of in this, open space where you're working and things are going well on that side, and then you've also got your yoga
Mm,
side of it, and so that's super cool. So I'm also actually taking my I know I've been telling you this for months, but I'm taking my yoga teaching certification in September.
which is awesome, and I'm excited about the studio that you're doing it at. I
Uh-huh.
definitely wanna check it out sometime.
Yeah, Breathe Together. So
Heard some
Breathe
good
Together
stuff.
Yoga plug for Breathe Together Yoga in Saratoga, Los Gatos. Los Gatos. And so yeah, I've heard great things.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome to be my guest. I get guests and I've got
Yeah,
like
I'd
a
love to check it out.
connection and stuff, and they've got something called aerial yoga. Have you ever heard of this?
I took one class one time.
Okay. So nobody
Yeah.
told me what it was. So I have a yoga teacher friend and she did not tell me what it was. She was just like aerial yoga and I was like, I don't know what that means. Let's go. And I didn't realize I'd be off the ground for most of the class. So it's
Oh my gosh.
basically like acrobatic. There's, this cloth, thick cloth that's hanging from the air and hopefully it's kind of well placed onto the ceiling and
Mhm.
really secure. And you can spread it out and put it in different ways so that you end up in this hanging thing and there are parts of it that are very require a lot of strength, obviously. I'm so glad that I'd been lifting 2 years prior to even touching it because I don't know that I'd be able to do half of those moves if I hadn't. It did require a lot of strength, and then there's some parts that are just cool that you just, like, lay inside the hammock basically, and you're suspended in the air and stuff, so I totally recommend it.
Very cool. That sounds
So what
like a fun time.
right? It's totally we'll do it. I personally, I want to do sound bath yoga.
Oh, yeah.
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 So that's my goal. So utilization of like sound bowls and some other, kind of just, sound immersive type of techniques,
We need that at
right?
the climbing gym, especially considering our yoga studio is just below, like, the weight area and the treadmills, and so it's possible to get really yogic and tune out all of that noise
Yeah,
and turn inward,
yeah.
but it is a challenge.
It
It's
can be a
definitely
challenge.
a challenge.
Yeah.
So we need you.
Thank you. Plug into feet. So yeah, that's what I'm kind of aiming to do. I want to do, part like open and close with the sound bath and then, get into poses obviously. But
Very
that's my
cool. Taking philosophy classes up there, reading Bhagavad Gita. It's cool. It's like it's very immersive. It's probably for I think for a lot of people the most true yogic lifestyle that you're going to ever lead in your life, and they kind of expect you to walk away from that and you know, take whatever you're going to take with you. Completely life changing, completely changes like the way that I see certain things. There's always kind of once you're taught something, then you have that undercurrent of, knowledge, and it changes your perception.
So you feel like your yogic practice and teaching has changed how you do other things?
Yeah, even I mean, just my interpretation of what yoga is changed a lot from being there. Um, I think a lot of, like, Western yoga is super focused on the physical practice, and, when we think of yoga class, we think of, like, "Oh, I'm moving my body, I'm doing these, different
It's
positions, it's
exercise.
exercise." I'm wearing my cute yoga outfit, um,
Yoga pants. I mean, come on, that alone
yoga
is an
pants,
industry.
yoga mat. You see all the stuff that's like, "Oh, get your yoga body," and we have this association of, like, what it is to be, I
Fit.
guess, fit, someone in yoga, but, it's ultimately, like, where it comes from as, like, an Indian practice. It's a spirituality, um, it's just a way of, like, living your life. It's like a worldview, and,
It's like mind, body, and spirit.
yeah, the body is just one small, small fraction of it, and a big part of yoga is detachment from your body, the identities that you put on yourself,
Limitations you put on yourself.
every limiting adjunct that you see, your career, your family role, your physical body, all of these things that you place on yourself, your gender, or things that have been placed on you, stripping those away.
Well, that's interesting you say that because you had a career in engineering for a
Mhm.
while and then you made this move. You kind of wanted to move away from the traditional Silicon Valley engineer construction type of landscape and move more into things that would help people, help nature. So talk about what you're doing now.
Right now, career-wise, I'm transitioning into open space management, which has been really cool, and that was something that I kind of, again, like, stumbled into this past year. Leaving engineering, that was, like, a big identity shift too, because we have a tendency to identify with our jobs and with what we're doing, and then I think especially being, like, a woman in STEM, you're encouraged to, like, identify with your job a lot, and you're encouraged to, like, dive deep and be like, "Oh, like, I'm a woman engineer. I'm a female engineer."
Mhm.
Through school and then in work, I think it kinda became a crutch of people assume that I'm smart because I'm an engineer, or,
Mhm.
like, people have assumptions about me, generally, like, good assumptions because I did this, like, "Oh, my family is happy because of this," and then when I take that away,
Mhm.
I lose that part of my identity,
Mhm.
and that was challenging, and then I have to, like, look to other places, and I have to, like, assure myself, like, that I'm smart. I find validation through things that aren't
Internal.
external. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, trying to find more internal, validation, and I think that applies not just to career, it applies to, as a woman, like, how you see yourself, how you deal with, like, aging in society, and
Expectations,
expectations that you place on
society.
yourself,
Yeah.
that other people place on you, and I think that the yogic philosophy, the idea of stripping those things away, is really helpful for dealing with that natural sort of change that's inevitable in this life.
Yeah, I think that there are so many. I feel like there has been a shift on the awareness of, yoga and then also other ways to practice removing ourselves
Mhm.
from the materialistic expectations of society, what that means, because I know there are kind of 2 aspects of it that I've heard, or probably more, but one is, well, there needs to be more women engineers because a hair dryer was made by a man, and it would have been, so much more economic and energy efficient if a
Mhm.
woman had made it. Well, yeah, sure, maybe, but I think when you get into the reality of what it means to be, kind of a big corp type of engineer where you're in high tech and you're working one piece, one very small piece of a puzzle. For example, I did a lot of product management, program management, and I, worked on a very small marketing piece of technology. And I love doing it, especially the communication portion of it. But I found, number one, I did want to have, I feel like back in the day, they had more kind of child friendly, family friendly, they had picnics, family picnics, encouraged family to come, bring your daughter to work day was the norm. And I felt as though there was the bring your kid to work day, but the kids go off into their own class
Mm.
and they do their own thing so that the parents can work,
Mm.
and it becomes more of a babysitting service than a, "Hey, your kids get to come to work with you and see." And so for me, my kids watched me get my MBA. Because of COVID, my kids watched me work from home a lot
Mhm.
for many years. And I, have really gotten used to the idea of having my kids kind of watch me do what I'm doing so that they can learn from example of what it means to be an adult in the real world. And when they say things like, "Oh, I wish I had this," or "I wish I could," well, guess what? Like, you're
This is
on your
what it
path. Yeah,
takes.
this is what it takes. Like,
Mhm.
exactly. I get to give that example. And when they get to see that, I think upfront. Whereas if things are more separate and segregated, then that's not the case. So it's like that's what motivated me to kind of, start my own business and do the coaching and the start my yoga certification, teaching certification and things like that, is that I wanted to have kind of more of a holistic lifestyle and incorporate some of those mind, body, spirit, kind of, activate those different parts into my everyday life
Mhm.
and start incorporating that.
Yeah, and choosing, you're choosing what you identify with and what your brand is, what you want it to
Exactly.
look like.
Yeah. So actually, you mentioned something, and unfortunately, we didn't catch it, which I do want to talk about. Is you specifically? I'm changing topics a little bit. We're going back to yoga. Using the breath. So
Mhm.
you do a class called breath work.
Yeah, it's
And
the breathwork and meditation for climbers
okay,
class. Yeah, we were having a nice chat about, just, like, the power of breath and how it often gets, it's not always thought about during, like, a yoga class. Like, usually you get cues, an instructor will tell you, like, "Oh, okay, inhale, lift your arms, exhale, and fold." And you mentioned how you've noticed that in a lot of yoga classes, um, whenever you're about to exert yourself and do something that requires a lot of like strength or effort, usually that's tied with the exhale. And that's super true. That's something that um, I try to involve in my breathwork and meditation class. Um, in any yoga class, there should be some encouragement to breathe diaphragmatically, to breathe deeply. And like sometimes it's just said, like, oh, breathe deeply. But what that means is, engaging your diaphragm, having your belly rise as you inhale and relax as you exhale. And that is kind of like the breath of relaxation. That's how we breathe when we're asleep. That's how, like, if you watch a baby, like their belly moves up and down as they breathe. And when you're at your most relaxed, when you're just like lounging on the couch or something, that's how you're going to naturally breathe. But we don't breathe like that all the time in our day to day life. A lot of times we'll have shallow breaths, which is what we have in fight or flight response. Um, or, you know, it's just something that we kind of naturally do without thinking, and that's because we need to stay alert and because, our lizard brain is like, "Oh, what if I see a bear? I need to be prepared." Um, and so you stay in that kind of like high strung
alert, just very
alert.
ready for anything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
alert
yeah.
area, and that serves you very well in a lot of ways, but it doesn't always serve you.
Especially
Um,
if you're constantly coming from that place. Like, you mentioned
mhm,
something really important, actually. You were talking about, like, if we see a bear. Well, because of the way our society is today, we do have different stressors. It's not the bear stressor, it's,
right.
like, other things. And so using the I feel, and I've heard this from other people too, is that using the bear mentality with, like, a deadline at work.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and people get really worked up over stuff that I mean, like, maybe it's, your deadline is important and stuff, but it isn't worth you, having a panic attack or going into, like, a real life or death stress response.
Right.
Um, and that's when breath work becomes really useful. There's, like, certain yogic breathing exercises, like, unusual kind of exercises that you can do to help train your breath. But ultimately, you just wanna be trying to trigger that relax response, by breathing deeply, and so something that I encourage in my breathwork for climbers class
Plug for breathwork for climbers at
is
the studio in San Jose.
great. I'll use, like, a climbing example of, like, "Oh, like, I'm climbing something and it's going well, but there's a big dino in front of me, like a big move,
And for anyone who doesn't know what a dyno is, it's just when you have to jump, by the way. Just a
jump,
layman's term.
hands-free,
Yeah.
scary, might fall,"
Might
or if there's, like, a really challenging sequence and you've tried it and you're getting all tired and not sure if you're gonna come down or not, um, to take pause there rather than just going for it.
yeah.
Take a deep breath and then try to exhale slowly with control as you move through that whole sequence.
Mhm. And just being
And
mindful, I think. You're not just like, "Let's just see what happens," which I do that sometimes,
yeah,
and I miss.
yeah.
But you're actually saying, okay, you're kind of almost in your mind, you're mindfully going for that hold.
Trying to calm yourself down and then breathe, try to find relaxation even in that really stressful moment that you're in. And so I try to apply that to climbing there or to like lifting or exercise, but it can be physical. It could also be mental stress, internal stress, work stress, family stress, trying to use that yogic practice, that yogic idea, and taking it wherever you go. And that's one of the things that I gained from my teacher training was like, oh, like breath mindfulness, like becoming aware of my breath and like using it when it serves me, um, having it, serve my body and not letting stress take over. And so that's been
Yeah, we were talking about how one thing that I appreciate about yoga and your class, I felt like you have a brand, and your brand is kind of the familiarity and the tone, when you have certain suggestions in your class. And I really appreciate that from your class. And almost feels like, oh, okay, I'm home. I'm like, and going into Shavasana, you have a very specific way of doing it. And it's the same every time I take your class.
yeah.
And other teachers also have something about their class that's almost a little bit of magic. It's like, their personality and their heart is in that, and you can see that. And I think that's the powerful thing about yoga is that yes, there is this practice and this learning, and you have to understand the anatomy of the body, and you have to understand, all these different practices. And then if you get into Ayurveda, then you understand that side of it as well. But each teacher kind of brings their own, flavor, personality, love to
Yeah.
the practice.
Yeah, and I think people take, whatever it is that they like and they try to I mean, that's what I do,
Yeah.
is, like, the kinds of classes that I like, the kinds of classes that got me into yoga are the ones where I'm not focused on, like, the teacher or on anyone else in the class. And granted, like, the first time you go to any yoga class, you're gonna be very, like, aware of what's going on, aware of what other people are doing, looking up at the instructor and, like, trying to figure out what's going on. But what I connect to the most is, like, when you go to the same class over and over again,
Mhm.
and there is that consistency, you're able to the poses and stuff kinda become second nature and, like, they will physically become easier as you go.
Mhm.
Just as you practice, you're gonna be more comfortable getting into any funny positions.
Mhm.
Um but, uh, if it is a consistent class, um, you're not even thinking about what the teacher's saying, what anyone else in the room is doing, and that's when you're able to, like, tune into yourself,
Mhm.
and those are the kinds of classes that I connect with,
Mhm.
and so that's what I try to do in my class. and that's like the style, I guess, that I try to go for as a yoga teacher.
Mhm.
Um, and then there's other styles that I really like too. Like I've gone to a lot of classes where uh it's like completely relaxing in a different way, and the teacher's like talking a lot, but like just the sound of their voice
Mhm.
or the things that they're saying are like really inspiring. And or sometimes I'll go to a class and I'll hear like cues that I'm like, oh, that's a really good cue.
Mhm.
Like I want to use that cue. Um, and you can get different things from different classes, different teachers, different styles, and it's super amazing what's out there.
Okay, let's play a game.
Yeah.
At the count of 3, let's both say one word, and it'll be fun to see what we both pick. One word to describe, like, either the yoga practice, what one could achieve from the yoga practice, like, one word that comes to mind, okay? And then at the count of 3, let's both say a word,
Okay.
okay?
Okay.
1,
One,
2, 3. Surrender.
self.
Okay,
Which
talk
is
more
I
about
mean,
that.
which is, like, kinda what you do. Surrender in the sense of, like, you are letting go of becoming closer to, like, your true self, your true nature, which is not, like, the external, which is not these things that you place on yourself or that others place on you.
It's like one of those hot 90-degree days. I don't know if it's that hot here.
It's it's that hot here.
Okay. Yeah, it's like one of those 90-degree days. But thank you so much for joining us on Modern Mom this week. Thank you,
Thank
Satara.
you
I
for
definitely want to
having
have you
me.
again.
This was super fun.
Yeah. And we'll see you next time.